Hello and welcome to Geek It Plays Epic Landscape Tutorials. This is tutorial number 4, entitled Marshes. In this tutorial we're going to be covering some of the more exciting parts of View, particularly the atmosphere settings. For this landscape we're going to be wanting to create a swampy look, and we're going to begin this process by clicking on the terrain button and creating our first mountain. And we're going to go ahead and position this and resize it. Click on this and edit your object, and let's add a function, an edit function. And you'll notice we're using a simple fractal node, and let's increase the roughness and decrease the gain. And this will create additional noise to the texture of our terrain. Here you see our mountain is not quite so smooth. Next, let's increase our resolution to 1024 by 1024, and we'll make a high resolution for this one. And let's just resize it again a little bit. And notice your main camera view as you make changes. Create a second terrain and make this one a little bit bigger and position it something like this. Okay, I'm going to edit object. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add a function, and we're going to click OK and go ahead and make it 1024 by 1024 resolution. And we didn't need to go edit the function because we already had it. It's going to do the same texture to this one as the previous terrain. Maybe one more little one right here. And we need to give it the same texture, so let's edit object, add same function, and change the resolution. And to make this have a more three-dimensional look, let's go ahead and stretch it out. Notice what this is doing in the main camera view. Okay, and once you're satisfied with your size, shape, and positioning of your terrains, we're going to need to drop them down using drop down button. So go through each one and make sure they're all dropping down so we don't have any floating mountains. And now that we have our mountains created, let's go ahead and make a swampy area in this region. And to do that, we're going to create another terrain. And we'll resize this. And you'll notice that it's hiding our mountains. So let's go ahead and edit our object, and let's reset the terrain. Let's go ahead and change the resolution to 1024 by 1024, and let's choose the paint tool and use the erase tool, and let's just go ahead and make small little touches, and you can hardly see them. And then decrease the size, and let's make some smaller ones. Something like this. Now let's go to effects, and we're going to click on stones several times. And you can right click and drag to see how that's coming along, and look at your profile. Maybe a little bit more stones. You can see how they're kind of growing. And then let's just clip the edges. So you can see these patches of rock. And let's go ahead and put them in our scene and drop it down to the ground. Okay, and we'll see in a minute to see if we need to make them taller or not. Okay, let's go to our main camera. And let's select our y-axis, and we're just going to bring that up to about 10 meters so we can overview it. And let's go to render our screen. And we're going to select user defined, and we're going to maybe make it to something like 480, and that will give us a nice wide screen. Okay, let's preview that. And you notice these hard edges right here, we need to fix those. So let's go ahead and go to our first terrain, edit object, and right here is where our hard edge is. So let's use our paint tool and dig it a little bit, and that just gets rid of that square edge a little bit. Okay, and let's fix the second terrain as well. Let's do the same thing right over here. You can actually use this zero edges tool, and that would fix this, but we want to keep some of these features, so we're going to do it this way this time. Okay, and let's do the third. Let's stay right here, and let's dig some in some other areas on this one. Something like this. Wow, I can't remember when digging was so much fun. Okay. Like that. Okay. Let's preview that. We still have just a little bit of edges right here. So let's try that again. And if you want to, you can just click zero edges, and you'll notice how there's no hard edges around here. Okay, and you can also clip the edges to zero it out. So there's several different ways to get rid of those hard edges. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Let's leave it like that for now. And maybe later on we'll add some more mountains, but I think it's looking good for now. So let's click OK, and although we're going to have a very nice landscape, we don't want to worry too much about the shape of the land as we do the atmosphere settings. Now let's change our attention to the main camera, and let's frame our scene a little bit more so that we see more of the atmosphere. Okay? Next, select our terrains that represent our mountains, and let's add a material. And we're going to go to the rocks and select old rock. Click OK. And let's wait for that to render in our thumbnail and see how that looks. Okay, let's select our terrain 4, and let's add old rock for this one as well. But this time we're going to modify it a little bit. What we're going to do is add some moss, so let's go up to our old rock and select the top moss and look in the environment tab. Other than changing the slope constraint a little bit, the default settings are fine, so click OK. Now that we have our landscape shaped nicely, let's go to ground and add a material to that, and let's switch it to mash. And this is just like dirty, polluted water. So let's go ahead and preview this. And you'll notice as it is right now, it looks kind of interesting, but it doesn't wow you. The atmosphere will play a big role in creating a wonderful scene. So let's go to our atmosphere editor and transform this ordinary scene into something great. And we're going to start this process by selecting the Sun tab, and then we're going to change the position of the sun. We're going to set the azimuth to maybe 99 and the pitch a little bit lower. So you can see how what it's doing over here in our thumbnail. Let's increase the size of the sun. Also increase the corona so you can see how it's starting to glow. Now we're going to go to the light tab, and we're going to set it to global illumination, and let's change the ambient color to maybe a gray. And let's set the light balance to 8 and increase the light intensity. Okay, the ambient light down a little. Okay, now let's change our skylight color, and maybe something that makes the rest of the scene look a little bit more gray. Let's view the thumbnail. Now let's click on the Clouds tab, and in the clouds we're going to add some fog down here on the ground. So let's go to Add, and we're going to also add some preset clouds. Let's do the fog. And the fog is set pretty nice for us, the altitude and the height. They're both at 5 meters. And if you look at the camera here, the fog will set just below the camera, so it won't get too much in the way of the camera. Let's increase the density just a little bit, and the rest of this looks like the default settings are pretty good. So let's go now and add our clouds. We're going to let's add the frog tail. Now let's go ahead and increase the scale a little bit, maybe to 30. And let's also increase the density, and that will make it look nicer with our lighting and the ambient lighting a little bit. Okay, now it's starting to look pretty nice in the main camera thumbnail, so let's add another cloud. And let's choose smooth hair. And let's put our altitude down a little bit to about 240, something around there. And I'm going to increase the height here. And you just want to play with these settings and look and see how it's changing your clouds and try different things. This is where it's time to be creative. Okay. Let's increase the details quite a bit so we'll have a more interesting look in the sky. And I'm going to also increase the altitude variations and the ambient lighting. Okay, and you can look in this view and see how it's turning out. Now let's go to our Sky, Fog, and Haze tab, and let's change the sky color. We're going to change it to a darker blue. Okay, and leave 100 on the ground density and bump up the altitude a little, somewhere to around 4. And increase the decay amount about to 90. And decrease the altitude to about 320. Now darken the decay color and give it a darker reddish color. Now let's work on our fog and haze, and let's edit our color and let's make it gray and just darken it a little bit. Okay, now we're going to play with these haze, and I think the density and the altitude could use a little bit more. You can see already how that's darkening our sky over here. Okay, at the same time we're going to drop the density of the fog down a little bit, and also the altitude maybe to 40s, in the 40s range. Okay, another thing I'd like us to do is to change the fog color to a red color, and you can see that it gives us a nicer darker red glow right through here. Okay, and let's put our glow intensity to about 2%, and let's decrease the scattering to about 65, and look what that does for us. Now we also want to increase the quality boost, just because we're working with clouds. That's always a good idea. And you'll notice with most of these tutorials, when we get a scene to about this point, we're going to start messing with the settings and just making sure they're perfect. And it always seems like we're moving them ever so slightly. But if you'll notice your main camera in your thumbnail, you'll also notice that it does matter and it makes a big difference. So don't be afraid to go ahead and change yours and mess with the settings and take some time and get it just right. Okay, now let's go to our lighting tab and let's increase our light intensity. We want it a little bit brighter. And let's go and change our skylight color since we've changed our color motif. And view that in our main camera thumbnail. Okay, I think maybe even lighter will give us even better details and make it more interesting. Okay, I think that's much better. Okay, now let's go ahead and click on our terrain number 4. Let's select the material and open that material editor, and we're going to add an ecosystem, and let's add a plant, and let's choose dry weeds. Let's increase the density. Actually, let's leave it down at 60, and let's leave the decay at the default and the scaling at the default, and let's populate that, and we're going to view it down here, and then we'll bump up the density and watch what it does for us. Okay, because we want a little bit more, we'll just keep inching it up until it's sufficient for us. And this looks much more interesting. It just looks kind of mashed in there in the water with the darker clouds. It looks good. Okay, let's go to Atmosphere and Atmosphere Editor, and let's brighten up our light intensity. Let's go to Clouds and increase our fog, and let's increase the cover of the fog just slightly. It'll increase our interest in this area. Let's go to our lighting and bump up the quality, and we're just going to set the quality to 4 down here in the global settings. And this will take a longer time to render, but you won't have a grain in your clouds, and it'll keep it nice and smooth. Let's click OK, and then let's go to our render options and set it to 800 by 400. Let's go ahead and choose superior quality. If you do use a lesser quality, it will affect the picture quite a bit. So let's go ahead and render. It's going to take some time, so we'll be back in just a second with our final rendering. And here we have our final product. And you can see that we have a nice layer of fog right through here in the marshes, and nice resolution of the mountains. But I think the atmosphere is the star of our show in this landscape. So as you're creating scenes, make sure you go ahead and pay attention to the details and really use your atmosphere to your advantage. I very much enjoyed sharing this epic landscape with you. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial by Geek at Play Studios. I'd like to invite you to visit us on the web at www.geekatplay.com.